All right. So welcome to Adult Education for February 28th, 2021. We have a wonderful opportunity to learn and grow together. Let's open in prayer. Holy and gracious God, we give thanks for this day and for the opportunity to learn, to grow, to take your word to heart, to learn about ourselves and to engage with our world more deeply. Amen. All right, Jenny, would you like to take it over?
All right, I am pleased to introduce Betsy Delzer. She is a mind-body coach in the public school system, and she works at my school right now as an art teacher as well. She is also the founder of Rise for the Greater Good. She does many things. She focuses her coaching and skill training on mindfulness-based emotional intelligence, which as a school counselor is dear to my heart. I know that I'm not including all of the things, but some of the things from her website that I found, she does yoga teaching and training, racial justice and healing, restorative practice training, contemplative practices, and she does this with both students, staff members, and leaders, not only in our community, but throughout the state and maybe even nationwide. I currently try to attend one of her classes she offers to our staff members, which is once a week. It's a compassion circle. And I know I have found really great insights from those classes that I go to in dealing with students and staff members and my daily interactions. And especially with all the changes that have happened this year throughout school. So it's been a really great practice, and I really appreciate her teaching, and I'm looking forward to her session today.
Thanks, Jenny. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. Yeah, it's good to see you. I am really delighted by this opportunity just to be able to speak in a kind of slightly different setting than I'm used to. So I just got real big because he spotlighted me, which is great. I'm not used to looking at myself quite that big, but this is wonderful. I don't know if I do have rights to share my screen. So in just a moment, I might do that. But let me just tell you a little bit about the winding trail that Jenny mentioned. That is my career that brought me to you, because sometimes it's helpful to understand just the context in which we find each other. So I actually moved to the Madison area in the 80s. I was a child overseas for the first several years of my life because my dad worked for IBM in the 80s. And so we lived in Singapore and England, and I moved here in middle school. And so I have this real tender kind of area of my heart for the middle schoolers that Jenny and I work with together now. This is my 20th year in the Middleton schools. 15 of those years were spent as an elementary art teacher. This is actually my first year working in a middle school, so I'm still in culture shock. And along the way teaching art, I actually have a degree in philosophy and world religions. And I don't know what I thought I was going to do with that, if you're wondering. I don't know, but it has found its way into my life over and over again, primarily because of probably my very rich faith heritage and roots. So I wanted to bring this into the space just because it gives us a little bit of connection and context. My parents had a pretty radical conversion to Christianity in the mid-70s. And as the story goes, I was their third child, but first as believers in the faith in 77. And so my name is Elizabeth. It means given to God, consecrated to God. And a lot of my upbringing was just richly saturated in practices, devotionals, understanding the Bible. I went to Taylor University in Indiana. That's where I got my philosophy and world religions degree. So All that to say, my faith journey has widened a bit. It's taken me out of the conventional church somewhat. And when I was a teacher and a mom, a young mom, I would say I wasn't really a young mom, but I was a mom to these young humans. I started a physical practice of yoga and really just started doing that as a way to stretch and become more nimble, and the benefits just seemed to be many. And I decided to study integrative yoga therapy, and then a multiple number of mindfulness type trainings and such. So really got interested in that as an art teacher. And what's interesting about that is that my life was kind of these two spheres of teaching and being in the classroom, and then also teaching yoga and starting to really work with meditation and how to train your attention. So how to train like landing your attention. And I will say, one of the things I'm excited to weave together today is a place I can't really go in the schools, which is this connectedness between the practices of contemplation and our spirituality. Because obviously in the schools, I'm working always in a secular, through a secular lens, just to make it safe for all of our kids and staff. But what happened there was an important junction that I just want to give some context to, and that is there was a change in leadership. In 2016, we had a change in superintendency, and the superintendent who was coming to be, George Mavrolis, was at the end of his career in education, very seasoned and experienced. And he said, you know what if anything could we do to support our staff? And so from that point, I really got to move into this coaching role and out of the classroom. And my primary target was supporting individuals in their own sort of, really in some ways it was spiritual formation, but it was just kind of the processing of their lives and well-being. And so that position evolved. And, you know, Jenny mentioned being a mind-body coach, and some of you might be like, what on earth is that, you know? So essentially it's, you know, if you think of a personal trainer who's going to bring you to the gym and kind of help you figure out what to do there, my job for several years has been being able to sit with people and listen to their story and then move through a coaching cycle that focused on 3 spheres: the breath, the body, and compassion. And so to summarize, the breath, you know, it's our first friend, right? And so we work with the breath to kind of help our nervous system. The body tells the truth, right? So the mind is very, very busy, and people get very kind of frustrated sometimes when they think about slowing down to pause and think about their thoughts or look at their thoughts. And I always say, you know, this is actually our brilliance, because our minds are wired. And in this setting, we can say, I do believe that we're created beings, right? And the creativity of an artist who made the stars in the sky also created our intricate system and way of being. And so the body, what I'm talking about in terms of the sphere of that coaching is really around yoga. And when I think of yoga, I'm just thinking of mindful movement. So moving and knowing that you're moving, breathing, and yoking that together. So it's a leap away kind of from traditional yoga as a spiritual practice. Finally, compassion is my jam. That's why I'm here today. Because compassion, we think of, right? We all have this, just from a very brief ability to see your face, many of you, we have a lifetime of understanding what compassion means. It's one of the, I think, first ways that we connect to each other as children. And then as we grow, we just develop an understanding of compassion. And what I think of with compassion is really a practice, a way of encountering compassion as a practice. And so that's what I'm here to tell you about today. So my current role, as Jenny mentioned, COVID and other types of transitions in our district brought me 50-50. So now I'm 50% coaching and 50% teaching. And that brought me here today. So I have just a few things that I wanted to share with you as I was thinking about how we could connect our hearts over these little boxes in this space and time that we have together. And a few words came to me that I created images for, and I'll share them with Jenny so that you have access to them if you want to just kind of unpack some of these thoughts together. Before I share my screen and we just kind of dive into some of these ideas, I would love it if we could actually do what I call a practice of arrival, which is just taking a moment to take a breath. So Jeff led us through a prayer in the beginning, and we think of prayer as sort of this is a conversation, right? Sometimes a petition, sometimes reflection, but it's conversating. And when we do something like meditating, there's lots of ways that can stay in the conversation mode. And there are ways where you can just take a moment to feel your feet on the ground. And so that's what I'm going to do, is just feel my feet beneath me, take a moment to straighten my spine as much as possible. And then I just drop into my breath. And by that, I think about the breath in. And I think about the breath out. Just take 2 or 3 more breaths. And this could feel a little unusual if you're not used to doing something like this, but it's very good for the nervous system just to be mindful of the breath. A few rounds. Last one, deep breath in. And a long breath out. Good. That's so helpful to me to just be able to feel my heart start to slow down just a bit. Recently, I was on an airplane, which I hadn't done in a while because my parents take the winter in Naples. So I was going down to see them. My mom had had a recent surgery and needed a little bit of help. So I went down and I was sitting, and they were de-icing the plane, and they said, well, we're having some mechanical issues, and that's like never my favorite thing before I'm taking off into the air. And so I just grabbed I had a heart rate monitor on. I looked down and I checked out my heart, and my heart rate was in the mid 70s. And I just took about a minute to elongate my breath in and out, and my heart rate dropped into the 50s, which is a much more calm state. So for me, there's just a lot of biofeedback when it comes to utilizing the breath. All right, I'm going to try to share my screen and see how this goes. Let's see. I hope that you're coming up with a few questions, because I have some time for that at the end. All right, we just did that, practice of arrival. These are some of the benefits we've seen investing in compassion in our community. So this is literally just taken right out of feedback that we've gotten in the schools, where we're creating space for compassion practices. And that's one of the things Jenny mentioned, one of our connecting points. Sense of belonging, an ability to comfort and be comforted, a place to be seen, a consistent support. And we take care, right, of ourselves to be able to take care of each other. I think as I look at this list and my memories of the church, I think a very healthy, optimal functioning church would be the same, right? All of these things might be something that people, congregants, and your community feels. So the first thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is this concept of self-compassion, authenticating compassion for others. So let's just unpack that a little bit, all right? I'm thinking of a few different people here Kristen Neff is a self-compassion researcher, and she has spent 20 years researching self-compassion at the University of Texas, Austin. And she spends a lot of time really thinking about studying and speaking, teaching about how, as we shift our relationship to ourselves, we shift all the other elements in our lives. And what I have observed, so what I'm sharing with you today is just humble observations, okay? And this is just from the times I've gotten to speak with one-on-one, but then also speaking to large numbers of people as well. So just what I've observed is that when we are able to sort of start to shift the interior like monologue, right? It's actually kind of like a dialogue. What's happening, how we think about ourselves, how we think about the world around us. We are able then, in my humble observation, to authentically find compassion for others. Now, here's what I will say. Sharon Salzberg is very, very famous for her compassion, really leadership, I would say. She started the Insight Meditation Society, and she's just an incredible meditation teacher of the Buddhist lineage. And she would say, it's not necessary. This doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have self-compassion in order to be compassionate towards others. She's a guide around, like, if you practice compassion towards others, most likely it will impact yourself. But she says it doesn't have to sort of precede. One doesn't precede the other. I somewhat agree with that and somewhat disagree, which is why I created this image and statement. And that is because as I started to work through sort of my interior landscape, coming into a place where I can be gentle with whatever is coming to me in that moment. It might be a struggle, right? I'm parenting teens now, and there's a lot of challenge there, right? The transitions and challenges in COVID and the pandemic, the ways our lives have drastically shifted and moved into spaces of uncertainty. This brings up many opportunities for me to pause and to recognize, hey, what you're carrying right now is difficult. This is hard. And it won't always feel this way, but this is how it feels right now. What do you need? And really actually engaging with myself in that gentle and loving and kind manner. That for me feels like the basis to flourish in my relationships, right? Do you see that connection? Because I'm able then to not just find connection and kindness in my actions and connection to other people, but I'm able to really provide that care for myself. As someone who, as I mentioned, has this very rich understanding and belief, I guess I would say, in being a created being and having a relationship to the Creator, I also believe that my being self-compassionate is a way to honor that. It's a way to honor that, the fact that I was brought here and created here and given this life. So it doesn't feel like it's, I think a lot of times when you put the word self in front of anything, it starts to feel self-serving, right? And there's many things in, especially Christian texts and multiple other religions as well, that, you move away from self-service. And self-compassion, to me, is not self-serving. It's kind, generous, and honoring. So, as humble observations. I'd be so curious what you think of that. So, but I have just a couple more things to share. Okay, my second thought for you today is around compassion and restoration. It is no accident, right? I think that my winding road, the evolution of my position in being a meditation trainer and coach has evolved really into focusing on what in education we call restorative practices, but it's really the art of restoring human connection. So in the justice system, we think of restorative justice. This could be a whole nother Sunday education morning moment, but I'll just keep it simple to say, when we are engaging with restorative practices, we're really thinking about building community. And then if and when harm happens or difficulty happens, instead of our tradition of being punitive and harming the harmer, we work to heal. So we're bringing people together in circles, or I like to say in Zoom, squarecles. And we're having heartfelt conversations where we can bring equity to voice and perspective. And in that, right, in the ability to not only name your experience, your impact, how you're feeling and your needs, you're also listening. And that art of listening is where the compassion comes in and where the restoration really becomes true. Because if you're bringing people together, it's almost vital. It's almost necessary that you come together through the lens of compassion versus anything else. So it restores connection. And I think we think of connection in so many ways, but I'm really thinking in terms of how we are working together, being together, living, loving, grieving, how we do life together. Compassion restores that connection. Talk a little bit more about that in a moment when we talk about how to practice. And compassion expands the heart. So one of my words for 2021, I pick words to just kind of focus my intention on. I use them as a filter all the time. I used them this morning to think, as I arrive to this space with you, how am I going to show up with my intention for even just this year, which is, my words are spacious, expansive, and heart. And they're three separate but very connected as well. And when I say compassion expands the heart, what I'm really talking about is actually, I'm really interested in somatic experiencing, how the body responds to things. And when you are practicing compassion, sometimes you can experience the actual sense of the heart opening, kind of a warming in the space. It's almost a kind of that excited feeling. If you think about what joy feels like in your body, sometimes it shows up in a smile, or it shows up a lot of times in our heart space. This is not just Jenny's friend from the schools who does yoga thinking something on her own. This is actually scientifically backed. Okay, so we have this like amazing pioneer of contemplative neuroscience in our city, right? So many of you probably are so familiar with Richie Davidson and the work at the Center for Healthy Minds in UW. One of his colleagues, Tanya Singer, is a German neuroscientist, and she, if you remember the Time magazine cover with Mathieu Ricard, a bald gentleman with electrodes all over his head, a lot of this research was done right here in Madison, but Tanya worked with Mathieu, and she had him in the MRI and was looking at his brain. The reason they chose him is because he has something like, I think they tried to encapsulate or figure out like how many thousands of hours of meditation he's done. And something in the tens of thousands, 50,000 hours of meditation, something like this. They can really see in MRIs, they can see a little bit of a shift in our brains in as little as 8 minutes. So what happened with this compassion study was that she asked him to think thoughts of empathy. And he started in the MRI practicing compassion. And I'm going to tell you what I'm talking about in a moment. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm like, what does she mean practicing compassion? Well, I'll tell you. But he started practicing compassion, and she started looking at the MRI, and she said his pleasure center was lighting up. Right? So when I'm talking about the expansion of the heart, right, this is about the way our body feels when things are, that's also connected to our pleasure center, right? So the pleasure center of the brain. She says, Mathieu, are you thinking about your lunch? She's like, this is what happens when people think about their favorite glass of wine or a bar of chocolate or a walk on the beach. This is the part of the brain that lights up usually. And I'm asking him to think of, thoughts of empathy. And he said, no, I'm practicing compassion. And she said, actually, I need you to really connect with someone's suffering. That's what I mean by empathy. So he said, oh, okay. So he started replaying in his mind a documentary he had seen where he had seen someone in a lot of pain. It's some malnourished children, I believe, at an orphanage. And so he started replaying scenes. And as he replayed the scenes of a documentary where someone was in pain, his own pain center started lighting up. And so she took this information, and her summary of some of this, which I'm drastically watering down, is that empathy is really this resonance of human experience. And especially as it relates to suffering, empathy is the resonance of human experience and suffering. Because she was able to see when we think of someone else's pain, we experience it as our own, right? So empathy is the fifth competency of emotional intelligence. It's very closely related to compassion, very closely. It's not the same thing, but it's closely related. Let's go back to Tanya and Mathieu for just a moment. She said, okay, I think I've gotten what I need. Are you ready to break for lunch? And he said, I will, but first I'm going to spend a moment practicing compassion. She watched his map of his brain ignite in different areas as he released the imagery of the movie, the film, the documentary, and moved his mind into a compassion practice. Once he was there practicing compassion, the pleasure center of his brain began to light again. So this is really fascinating to me. I know that there is a little bit of research perhaps on the impact of prayer in a similar way, but what I'm going to talk a little bit about right now is just exactly what I'm referring to when I'm talking about the practice of compassion. And I will do my very best, I've never done this before, but I'll do my very best to integrate or weave together how this could translate for me into prayer. It also belongs to you and your experience. So whatever, you may just kind of start to figure out how you would filter and create your version as well. So loving kindness is a meditation from Buddhist heritage and lineage. The concept here is that you think really traditionally metta loving kindness is 4 different categories. So you think of yourself, you think of a loved one, you think of a neutral person, okay, someone you don't really have strong feelings for either way, and you think of someone with whom you have some difficulty. So not like major difficulty, trauma or pain, but a little bit irritated, sort of a difficult interaction recently. This is where my second slide of compassion, restoring connection, I have personally benefited from this, having a relationship that encountered some difficulties, some severing of our connection and understanding of one another. And in practicing loving kindness toward this person, I began to soften and just see her humanity again, which I think is ultimately what happens when we are disconnected. We lose each other's humanity. So when you're practicing in these 4 categories, self, loved one, neutral, and difficult, really you take a moment and I will go ahead and lead you through practice after I explain it, where you're really wishing well, okay? So you're wishing for kind of 3 basic components: happiness, health, and safety or freedom. Okay, so happy, healthy, and free are kind of the words. So may you be happy, healthy, and free. And it's a repetition. So when Matthew's pleasure center was lighting up, he was doing this practice. He was sitting with an image of someone and imagining this person and then wishing toward this person, feeling for this person, right? May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be free. And then moving into these other elements. Do you have to choose those words? No, they're just traditionally the words. When I think about this kind of intersecting with prayer, it becomes, I guess the word I'm thinking of, and maybe it's my upbringing, but is petition, and asking, or may this, may this person be, so you're asking a third party, right? Like you're asking who it is that you would call God, your source, Jesus, may they be, right? Like may they be happy, may they be healthy, praying for someone, right? Praying for someone and for yourself as well. I realized pretty soon into my adult faith life that a lot of the time when I was praying for myself, I had sort of the Lord's Prayer ingrained, and I was doing a lot of praying for forgiveness and gratitude. I would say those were probably the two themes of things that I found I was praying about. I hadn't really prayed for my happiness or my health unless it was like a request, right? So it is a shift. It is a shift to sit. For me right now, I consider prayer sort of like breath. I don't know that there is a distinct separation for me when I look in the sky and have a moment of awe. That's an integrated mindfulness practice because I'm mindfully aware in that moment. And that's what we call an integrated practice. And for me, it's a spiritual practice because in that moment of awe is connected to the bigger sense of self and being here, right? So there are a couple of other types of practices that I will just run through, and then we'll practice the loving kindness, and then we have maybe a little bit of time for questions. I would love to hear from you as well. So Just Like Me is a wonderful practice. I'm going to encourage you to do Just Like Me, the next time you have maybe a squabble in the kitchen, or you're unloading the dishwasher for the 100th time this week or something, and there's sort of this moment of frustration. I think I use Just Like Me and just like me, this person, right? Like, just like me, my son, who will not unload the dishwasher, mind you, wants to feel good here in this home. Just like me, she wants to be understood. Just like me, we feel better when we are in communion with each other and our connection is pure, just like me. And so that's like a little bit, that sounds a little bit flowery. I can use it in Target as well. Like, just like me, these people want to check out. Just like me, the 6 foot of distance is difficult to maintain. Just like me, we're a bit sick of wearing the mask. And just like me, we have places to go, things to do, just like me. You just have this moment where you're connecting to outside of yourself, outside of the busybody that is yourself. Grief relief is a beautiful practice Jenny and I have gotten to experience together, where you're really just breathing in the suffering of someone else. And if you think about it in its most, this is called Tonglen, also a Buddhist meditation practice. Tonglen, you pull in the suffering, it sort of transforms in your breath, and then you just wish them relief. This could easily be turned into a sort of a prayer type format where you're really praying for the relief of suffering, and then and you're utilizing your breath just as simply a cord of connection. I often say, I mentioned the integrated practice of noticing the sky. Our COVID precautions, what we have to do with our masks, as much as we may be, they may be tiring and difficult at times to wear. I think often about our COVID precautions as being a compassion practice. Like, I'm doing this for myself to keep myself safe. I'm doing this for you to keep you safe. And together, this is how we can honor each other. It feels better when I'm putting on my mask. Oh my goodness. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to lead you through a loving kindness practice, just like the one that Mathieu was experiencing when he was in the MRI. And you can filter and make it your own as you're listening and thinking through it. A guided practice is just like someone leading us through a prayer, really, but just slightly different. So, and then we'll come together and in closing, maybe have some questions and conversation. So let's go ahead, and once again, anytime I just am beginning to practice, I just sort of think about my seat, and I find a breath or two that are mindful and aware, just breathing and knowing that I'm breathing. And switching up the order just a little bit, I'm going to ask for you, please, to bring to mind someone that you love very much. It might be someone in your space. Some of you are seated next to people. It might be someone you haven't seen for a very long time. And see if you can imagine this person's face really looking back at you and smiling, or just sort of ignited the way peace looks on someone's face. And as you see this person's face and you resource your breath, it's a simple wish. May you be happy. May you be healthy in body, mind, and spirit. May you be free. And you draw the breath in and you draw those wishes together, and gathering the threads of your attention. May you be happy, truly knowing true joy. May you be healthy. May you be free. Then find a breath and also a face of someone neutral. Maybe someone on this screen that you don't know very well. A neighbor. And see if you can imagine this person's face. You may not have all the contours and lines just right when we don't know someone well. But to the best of your ability, just see this person and see them soften into a smile, a contented look on their face. And you draw your attention back to these well wishes. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be free. May you be happy, healthy, and free. Enjoy a nice deep breath. And then thinking of someone with whom you have just maybe a little bit of tension. Not a lot, just a little. And can you see this person smiling back at you? See a softening in the ridge around their eyes and forehead. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be free. May you be happy, healthy, and free. And just sort of like you would back away from a fire if it gets too warm, just pull yourself back into the moment of sitting, the moment of being together in this virtual space. Back to your breath, your very first friend. And bring to mind, please, an image of yourself. It might be your favorite photograph or an image of yourself much younger. Sometimes I practice with an image of myself a little older. And in the most gentle way, can you see your own face ignited with joy and at peace? May I be happy, knowing true joy. May I be healthy in body, mind, and spirit. May I be free. May I be happy, healthy, and may I be free. You might want to wiggle your toes a bit. Take a breath or two. Sometimes I imagine if we have a very active thought life and prayer life, that could be one and the same. A practice like that takes a little bit of code switching between prayer and contemplation. It's just another way to practice. And it's a practice that expands the heart. So as we close, just taking a moment, you might notice that you have some questions, or you just might notice we have a narrator. So you might have questions, you might be critiquing, you might be learning, thinking, growing. But let's come back to each other in a space of curiosity and openness.
Thank you, Betsy.
You are welcome. So I would love to open it up if anybody has, I don't know if anybody was using the chat, or I can always punt it to one of the pastors for some reflection and as well. But does anybody have, and feel free to take me off spotlight so I can see more people.
I told Betsy if we had some time, maybe people had questions. Maybe it could be about her role. It could be about something she presented about today. I know we have about 5 more minutes or so. So I don't know if there's any questions people would like to ask in the chat or out loud.
Well, I will just say one thing I found interesting. I don't know if I have a question here, so apologies for that. But one thing I did find interesting was when thinking about somebody I loved, that was very easy. When thinking about somebody that I was having some tension with, that was also easy. But when I was thinking about someone I was indifferent with, I mean, I could think of a person, but it was hard for me to think of what it would be for them to be happy and healthy and free, just because I don't know their interior life well enough. I thought that was interesting just to think about that.
Well, thank you for sharing that. You know what I've noticed, Jeff, is like a lot of times I would choose like almost someone in an administrative, like a clerical role, someone that I was going to see, you know, just I don't really have a connection to, but I'm going to pass by their cubicle as I'm work, going to work or whatever. And I have found that when I see them in real life, right, outside of my imagination, I have this like deeper connection to them somehow. Like that's where the deepening of connection comes, is like when I see them after a practice like that. Yeah.
Anybody else have any questions?
I have a question. Thank you, Betsy, for sharing. I appreciate this. You're echoing a lot of what sort of the spiritual giants say through the years about mindfulness and being attentive to the people around us. And I appreciate that. In the last few years, I've become a fan of an app that I have on my phone called Simple Habit. And a lot of what you have said echoes a lot of the meditation practices that I've gone through with that. And I'm curious if you have any experience with online apps. There's another one that I use. It's more of a prayer thing. It's called Pray As You Go, which is more of a little 15-minute liturgy kind of thing. But I really enjoyed the Simple Habit thing, in that there's varying numbers of minutes, and sometimes it's a one and done. Sometimes right now I'm in the middle of a 31-day series, which is wonderful. And I find those really helpful for me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So a couple of recommendations right off the bat. One is if you like liturgy, there's something called The New Liturgy by Aaron Nyquist, Niequist is his last name, and it's, I think, just thenewliturgy.com. He used to be at Willow Creek. Is that the big church in Chicago area?
Yep.
And he's the son-in-law to Bill Hybels. So Shauna is his wife, and Shauna is Bill's daughter, and there's all sorts of things there. But they started something called The Practice, and there you go. Thanks, Jeff. So that might be something you're interested in exploring down sort of the blended route. If you're interested in just learning a little bit more about meditation, 10% Happier is a great app for someone who especially is like, I'm not so sure about this. This is a little hooey fooey, and I'm not so sure. There's a lot of humor. Dan Harris had an anxiety attack in front of millions of people on live television, and after that happened in his career, he found meditation to be one of the ways that he kind of pulled himself back together. So 10% Happier is an app. It has coursework, it has guided practices, and I highly recommend it, especially for the curious, maybe not so sure. Finally, there's something called Stop, Breathe, Think, or it's just sort of known sometimes as Breathe. That's what it says on the little app. And this one I particularly like because it asks you to check in with your body and your emotions, and then it calibrates a meditation for you. So it's almost like it does I need to bring you everywhere, Jeff. You're like do my live resource list as I'm speaking out about it. So that's what I would say for just a place to begin. And I have a comprehensive list of resources too that Jenny can share later if you'd like.
And Charlie, were you the one who recently preached on Hesed, loving kindness? Was that something else I heard? Just the phrase loving kindness is significant not only in Buddhism, but yeah. So Charlie, do you want to say anything about Hesed, or should we just acknowledge that it's?
Yeah, no, it's a core principle of Old Testament and leads into New Testament. It's often translated as God's steadfast love, and it's a great concept. I like that word, steadfast.
For sure.
Betsy, I'm glad that you mentioned the fascinating work that Dr. Davidson has done here at UW. Mm-hmm. One of my claims to fame, I got to be in the same room for him a couple of seconds. All I could see was his coat because I was in one of his experiments strapped in a MRI. I had to be quiet for 2 hours, which I guess not everybody can do, but apparently it's easy for me. But all of those things that he has found where there are real medical advantages to various kinds of meditation, I think I think a lot can be found online about his findings. They really show a scientific basis for a lot of what you're talking about. And I think the other unique thing is how different cultural traditions, different religions, in their approach to meditation, they may have a different practice than the one you had us try, but a whole bunch of these can find and get you to that same medically advantageous position. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Richie's work is really everywhere. And I think one of the things that I love, I know we're right here at the end of our time, but he was studying originally in the early 90s, he was looking at stress and depression and anxiety. And it was a conversation that he had with the Dalai Lama, actually, such as one might do if you're a meditation researcher. And the Dalai Lama said, if you can study anxiety and depression, can you also study kindness and compassion? And I love hearing him talk about that curve, like just that prompt in his life actually shifted the direction of his research and the focus of his energy in his work. And that's where we find ourselves today. So, yeah.
Well, thank you, Betsy. I'm going to put your website in the chat just if anyone wanted to see. I know it focuses on businesses and some of the things you've done even outside of schools, but if people are interested, they can take a look at that. And I, as always, appreciate your insight.
Yeah, well, it's an honor to be here and thanks for inviting me. It's really, really fun. So thank you everyone for having me.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you for being here, and thank you especially, Betsy. This was really wonderful.
Good, good, good. All right, enjoy the fog today. Be safe.
Yes, you all take care. All right.
Thank you.
I am going to close this in prayer. I forgot I wanted to do that. Holy and gracious God, we give thanks for our breath, for the breath that sustains us, and for the breath that sustains us in loving each other. May we hold each other in compassion. May we be mindful of one another, that we may be happy, healthy, and free. Amen. All right, take it easy, everyone. See you all next week. Next week, we have Bill McConnell, who is from the PCUSA. He's going to talk to us about the gospel according to Matthew, about Matthew 25, what it means for our congregation, and what it could mean for our future. All right, see you all next week. Bye.